Dr. Cox is a board-certified cardiologist and board-certified internal medicine. He currently works for Baptist Heart Specialists. And he graduated from the University of South Carolina, as you'll soon hear from
Go Gamecocks.
And I'll let you tell a little bit more about yourself as you get started.
Yeah, keep bringing all the Gator coaches up to Columbia. We love them. Yeah, like she was saying, I'm in the hospital today. I'm going to shock somebody here in about 55 minutes. So if y'all want to take a field trip, we'll talk about arrhythmias next time in AFib. I don't know if you have any personal experience with that, but a lot of people have experience with high blood pressure. So that's why we chose this topic. And obviously it's a widespread problem, and I see it every day. New onset, difficult to control high blood pressure. A lot of times, the primary care doc has run out of options. So it's a particular workup that I generally do. We can talk about that. It's included in the slides. And I like to jump around a lot, and I'm very informal. So if you have a question about high blood pressure, the recent, the data, on why we do what we do, any medications that you may or may not have been on, any choice that your primary care doc may or may not have selected for you, just shout it out. I'm very informal. So talking about high blood pressure, essentially the diagnosis is, and this is very fluid, it changes quite a bit with the guidelines, but the most recent one was 140/90. That's your target, and we actually get dinged in quality healthcare metrics that if we see a patient in the hospital, in the office, and they have diagnosis listed as essential hypertension, there are multiple types of hypertension, but essential hypertension is the most common, and their blood pressure is over 140/90, we get dinged. We got to get that blood pressure less than 140/90. A little caveat there with older patients now, older than 65 years of age, they allow it to go up to 150/90. But this is the generalized goal that we're having right now in our office, is really getting that blood pressure less than 140/90. So essential hypertension, like I said, most common, and generally this is the most common type that we see. There's no underlying cause. Secondary hypertension, 5%, there is a reversible cause, but most often it's essential hypertension, where it's usually genetics, and it's a combination of factors between diet, activity or lack thereof. Secondary hypertension we'll kind of go through, but it's only 5%. So even if we have a workup there, you want to make sure you go through it, because there can be different things going on with the kidneys. The kidneys are directly affected with the heart and blood pressure. Sometimes people can have renal artery stenosis. They have a blocked artery leading to their kidney. You put a stent in there, open up that blocked artery, just like you do with a heart cath. When you open up the coronary artery, you can do that with the renal artery, and the blood pressure issue goes away. Endocrine abnormalities, thyroid issues is the biggie. I always order TSH, looking for thyroid problems, because that's a big reversible cause that can lead to improved blood pressure. Aortic pathology, valve problems, aortic stenosis, another thing called aortic coarctation, where the aorta is the big vessel that comes off the heart that supplies blood flow out to the body. If there's a kind of a kink in there, so to speak, we call it coarctation. You can put a stent in that too, actually, and that helps improve blood pressure. So the classification models, basically, again, this changes. We've talked about prehypertension in the past. Right now, the big thing about why we don't drive everybody down to 110/70 is because you have, obviously, side effects from medications. You want less than 140/90. If you go above 140/90, you start seeing secondary events, stroke, heart attack, so on and so forth. So if you have somebody at the blood pressure in the 130s, and you look at someone with a blood pressure in the 120s or 110s, there's really no statistically significant difference. All you do is get with trying to increase medication to get to 110 with no real benefit is side effects of medications. There's a lot of side effects. Fatigue is being a big one. So you want people exercising, jogging, running. You don't want them so in a fog that they don't exercise the way that you'd like them to. So really 110 to 130, that's fine. There's really no benefit you're going to get from getting that lower number as long as it's less than 140/90. The thing about the new guidelines with stage 2 hypertension, if someone comes to my office, their blood pressure is 164, they're more than likely going to need 2 medications. So a lot of times we may put you on 2, but only on 1 pill. So we have a lot of combination pills that's actually got 2 medications in 1 pill. So those are patients, more than 80% of them are going to need 2 agents to get their blood pressure down to that 140/90 and less. So predisposing factors, obviously age, men and postmenopausal women. Family history is the big one. Sedentary lifestyle and stress. I don't think there's any of that going on around here. No stress. But big ones. And a lot of times, when people come to me because, their blood pressure just can't be managed appropriately, we start going into this. We delve into it. What are you doing? Are you exercising? And it's not just, okay, I walk all day at work. Yeah, but you walk from here to A to B and then you stop for a while. And you walk from B to C and you stop for a while. Do you get 30 minutes of cardio? 30 minutes of continuous walking? And a lot of them say no. Well, that's where your benefit comes in. Yeah, I walk around a lot too. I'm at the hospital today, but I'm not walking 30 minutes continuously. That's good cardio. And that's really the only guideline right now from a AHA, American Heart Association guideline, is to have 30 minutes, preferably every day, of continuous cardio exercise. Okay, and that's where we're trying to shoot for. The diet's the other big one, okay? Because a lot of people say, well, I exercise, but they don't watch their diet. Or vice versa, they diet, but they don't watch their exercise. Eating, 3 Big Macs with a Diet Coke, So it's a lot there where you want to watch what you intake, the caloric intake. The big thing about blood pressure is salt. So plenty of fruits and veggies, make sure you're exercising 30 minutes a day, eliminating, the fats, the red meats as much as possible. Eat more fish. It helps cholesterol. It helps blood pressure. And on down the road, it helps stroke and heart attack prevention. Obesity, growing epidemic in this country. Big time problem. So the education definitely is a must. And it's getting younger and younger. I've got patients. I'm a general cardiologist for adults. So 18 and older, usually 17, I'll start seeing patients. Blood pressure, obesity, sleep apnea, bad cholesterol. It's and I think it's just a part of the way our society has changed right now. So people aren't outside running and exercising anymore, not with tablets and phones, and they're living from their couch. So more and more education, definitely. So diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, other risk factors definitely are coexisting in a lot of these patients. But, I've had patients in training and in patients that I've been seeing here recently coming in with blood pressure pills, cholesterol pills, diabetes medications, eliminate all of them. So it is possible to get rid of all those medications. And watch the alcohol. Moderate intake of alcohol. Alcohol is a big one too that can cause an issue. Renal is the big problem. You don't have to know all this stuff. Endocrine, we talked about thyroid, glucocorticoids. A lot of times people are taking, over-the-counter stuff, testosterone replacements. Blood pressure can obviously be a problem with that. If you're making too much or too little, it can be an issue of thyroid. Endocrine pathways are a big one. So we do look for that. Coarctation, sleep-related sleep apnea, hypertension is a big one. And it doesn't have to be, the bigger, heavy-set guy. It can be the small, frail lady that has sleep apnea just as much. People say, I don't snore, I don't have sleep apnea. Only 50% of people who snore have sleep apnea. It's more diagnostic, or people who say, my spouse tells me I stop breathing at night. That's highly specific for sleep apnea. Also, daytime fatigue, resistant high blood pressure, what we're talking about now. Daytime somnolence, waking up in the morning, haven't felt like you've slept all night, because we'll do these home sleep tests and people actually will wake up 200 times a night and not even remember it. That's why they're fatigued when they wake up in the morning, because they have the apnea spells, and then the snoring is just the way that the body, it's like a reflex, it wakes itself up. But we're only talking about seconds, fractions of a second, but continuous times during the night that you wake up. Big problem with blood pressure. And I usually order a sleep study on everyone that I see that comes in with blood pressure issues. So these are the problems, and there's probably more than what's listed here that where blood pressure is going to ultimately get you. I'm a cardiologist. Obviously, we worry about heart disease, heart attacks, left ventricular hypertrophy. You have thickness of the heart muscle. It's just like people who work out. You work against the weights, the resistance. It's a muscle. The heart is a muscle. So the blood pressure is a resistance for the heart muscle, just like the weights in the gym are resistance to your muscles of your skeletal system. The muscle thickens. It can lead to what we call diastolic heart failure. Ultimately, systolic heart failure. Not everybody who has heart failure has a weakened heart muscle. 50% of them, you look at the heart squeezing on an echo, the squeeze is normal, but if you look at the thickness, it's not relaxing because it's thick. Long-standing blood pressure issue, diastolic heart failure, 50% of the heart failure patients that I see. So aneurysms, and then you other stuff like stroke. Obviously, the neurologists are very concerned about this. Can lead to encephalopathy, bleeding, kidney failure. So a lot of end organ effects, and we start looking for these end organ effects because sometimes people come in and they have blood pressure that seems to be okay, but you check their labs, their EKG shows a thickened heart muscle. They have protein in their urine, their creatinine, their kidney function's a little off. They're having some visual changes, some headaches at home, and you look at them and their blood pressure is 120. So I usually order a sleep monitor and a ambulatory blood pressure monitor because they may be having untreated high blood pressure at home, and you're only seeing them every once in a while. So 24 ambulatory blood pressure monitor is very valuable when you start working this up. And the flip side of the coin is some people come in, their blood pressure is 170, and you check all this stuff, echo, labs, EKG, all of it looks completely normal. They have white coat hypertension. You do an ambulatory 24-hour blood pressure monitor at home, and their average blood pressure is 110/70, and they come and see me, and their blood pressure is 160. People have a stress-induced high blood pressure sometimes, so usually those people I just watch. We do lifestyle modifications, keep an eye on it at home, and they don't necessarily need blood pressure because a lot of times they come in, we'll throw a pill at them. Next thing you know, they're in the ER, blood pressure, in the 70s and 80s, and hypotensive and dizzy, and that's what happens. So just have to monitor these things very closely. So the risk, cardiovascular disease, blood pressure, it's on a linear relationship. Blood pressure and heart disease, stroke, heart attack, you got to get that stuff under control because it is what we call the silent killer. And some people don't have any symptoms at all. They just come in for a routine blood pressure check, routine physical, their blood pressure's high, and they walk out on medications. But the fatigue, especially in the morning, especially occipital, in the back of the head, dizziness, fatigue, which could be sleep apnea, but sometimes these just kind of general symptoms that never have chest pain, never have shortness of breath, but man, I'm tired and I'm dizzy sometimes, especially when I get stressed out and I've got a headache in the morning, and there you go, blood pressure issues. So if you look, let me get back here a little bit. We talk about blood pressure. I mean, we always like to have a patient rest in the office. You want to make sure if you're checking the blood pressure in the office or at home, your cuff size is appropriate. Because sometimes they'll put a pediatric blood pressure cuff on you in the ER and it's 200 and it's not the right size cuff. So, but anyway, just the little things. I've got a lot more information on here. The laboratory tests we talked about, blood glucose. A lot of times when hypertension is diagnosed, so is diabetes because they come in and their blood sugar is out the roof. So it's one of the things that we check with the lipid because all these coexisting conditions, high cholesterol, blood pressure, diabetes, generally run together a lot of the time. So
you can check it at Publix. Anybody seen the free blood pressure?
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
yeah, check it.
For an account,
I check mine every time I'm in there. Yeah, I check it all the time.
Come on in, Steve.
Yeah, come on in. So when you talk about treatment, I mean, there's goals of therapy, obviously. I don't like saying a pill corrects everything, so there's always lifestyle modifications. Pharmacologic treatment for people who are resistant. Follow-up and monitoring are very important. We've got to see patients back on a routine basis. So the goals of therapy, and this is the key thing as far as things that we've been hitting on so far: the diet, the regular exercise, the weight loss, avoiding smoking, which is a big one, and alcohol overconsumption. Those things have to be corrected. So, and those are the modifications that we shoot for. One of the big things that I want to talk about with that, we're not even talking about. Yeah, go ahead before I show this next slide. Yeah. The ladder or the steps. Yeah. So those are the big ones. I mean, as far as losing weight, regular exercise, stop smoking, and this is where it is on the next one. Limiting the alcohol intake, eating plenty of fruits and vegetables. I mean, these things, I talk about them so much every day that it's kind of second nature to me, but a lot of people don't know this. They really don't know it. They're at home, they're eating soups, and which are loaded with salt. I mean, a lot of things they just don't check when they buy it. So I just tell people to eliminate the salt shaker. If you want to do a little pinch in your cooking, it's fine usually, but the salt shaker is where people get in trouble. And it doesn't matter, they're eating watermelon, but they're putting salt all over their watermelon. So the little things like that, you just need to really kind of zone into. But the lifestyle modifications, this is without pills, okay? And you can see the effect of blood pressure. Weight reduction, you can lose anywhere between 5 to 20 millimeters of mercury on the blood pressure. So they might come in at 155. They get on weight reduction program, 10 kilogram weight loss, about 20-pound weight loss. You're talking about blood pressure going from 155 to 135. No meds needed. Okay. I mean, obviously these take some time. We just got to continue to monitoring. But from dieting, 8 to 14 points, sodium restriction 2 to 8, just cutting out the salt, you can almost get 10 points off your blood pressure. Just cutting out the salt. Physical activity, you can cut another 10 points off by doing regular exercise. So if you get the 8 for the sodium and the 9 for the physical activity, just eliminating the salt, doing regular exercise, you can bring it down 17 points and avoid medication altogether. And then alcohol too, like I said, that's one that kind of sneaks in there. So trying to limit that as much as possible. Just moderate consumption. So we kind of looked at this earlier. This is med school kind of stuff. You stay up at 3 in the morning trying to memorize all this. But basically, the antihypertensive drugs work at different parts of the body. And we use certain ones for certain reasons. Either to gain the benefit where its mode of action is, or try to eliminate what its side effect is, because everything has a side effect. So the general thinking and the more recent guidelines said you want to start off with diuretics, calcium channel blockers, or ACE and ARBs. So the diuretics are good, especially people who may have some mild venous insufficiency, who are on their feet all day, get a little swelling. I may use that to help with the swelling and get their blood pressure down. Plus, it's one of the go-to things. It's really a good drug, and you really don't need to overdo it. Now, this is hydrochlorothiazide. This is not Lasix. Some people use Lasix, furosemide, usually for heart failure, but sometimes for people with more advanced venous insufficiency, dilated veins, they've had venous stripping and other things, I may use Lasix because it's a little bit more powerful, but I'm usually going after the swelling in the legs and not so much the blood pressure. If it's someone coming in for blood pressure, I'll just use a hydrochlorothiazide. Calcium channel blockers, amlodipine, you got to be cautious with that. It can cause swelling. So a lot of times you use amlodipine, it's a good drug, particularly in the African American patient population. But they come back usually at the 10 milligram dose, saying that they've got swelling in their legs. Doesn't mean that their heart's weak and they're going into heart failure. It's just a side effect of the medication. You can either add the diuretic if their blood pressure allows for it or needs it, or just switch to something else. And generally the guideline is switch to an ACE or an ARB. Now you'll see ACEs and ARBs, lisinopril, may cause cough. If anybody's ever been on lisinopril, they develop a cough. We usually switch to losartan. And we got to watch the kidney function. This is eliminated through the kidneys, but also these medications are indicated in heart failure as well. So if it's hypertensive patient with heart failure, they need to be on this. And they may need to be on a beta blocker. Generally, we don't start with beta blockers unless people have palpitations. Beta blockers, out of all these, are the only ones that affect the heart rate as well. Some calcium channel blockers do, but if I'm looking to decrease somebody's palpitations and get their blood pressure down, I'll use a beta blocker like atenolol. Or if they have a history of heart disease, they've had a heart attack, guideline recommended therapy is beta blockers. So you can see kind of what we go through about what the patient looks like, what their past medical history is, what we're trying to achieve, because all of them have side effects, obviously. Diuretics, you're losing potassium, you're losing magnesium. You're only going to lose potassium in one of two ways, through the urine or through the stool. So hydrochlorothiazide is a big one with that. Beta blockers, the lethargy is a big one with this. People who've been on beta blockers before, it can cause some sexual dysfunction. It also causes fatigue. I don't want you to be fatigued, I want you running. So unless you've had a history of heart attack, palpitations, most people tolerate it fine, but some people, obviously they get very fatigued. It affects the heart rate. The heart rate can go down. They don't want to run. They don't want to exercise. So I'll eliminate that and use something different or stronger. Calcium channel blockers, these things, beta blockers, beta receptors, calcium channel blockers, they work on the calcium receptors. These receptors are in the vascular system. They're in the heart. Beta blockers, decrease blood pressure, decrease heart rate. Calcium channel blockers, what they do is they vasodilate. So when you're trying to get blood pressure down, you get it down by one of several mechanisms really, but you really want to vasodilate, which is where nitrates and other things come into play to get the blood pressure down. But you have vasodilation, which is just a dilation of those arteries. You want to avoid constriction. Constriction is several things, like people come in, they got a hypertensive response because they've been doing cocaine. Okay, saw one this morning. Blood pressure is 220. You want to vasodilate those people as quickly as possible because their blood pressure is climbing because they're in a vasoconstrictive mode from the cocaine, from the stimulants. So that's where you want to get into the vasodilation. But the pedal edema is there. That's the swelling. The ACE inhibitors are very important. You got to monitor renal function. You got to monitor for dry cough on lisinopril. It's very common that we see that. Some of these other things I won't go in so much. We do see some in our elderly male population, prazosin, terazosin. They cause vasodilation, but they're particularly good with patients with BPH or prostate issues. But they're also blood pressure pills. Some people come in, they're dizzy. They're on high doses of these medications. I got called a urologist because we need to figure out something different. They're getting hypotensive because it's great with the prostate, but you're vasodilating too much. And people, when they stand up, they can fall over. They get orthostatic hypotension. So treatment of hypertension. I won't make y'all learn all of this. A lot of things we got to go through. A lot of this I've already talked about. And then in certain medications, you want to use, like with pregnancy. A lot of things are teratogenic. You don't want to use in pregnancy. Particularly the ACE inhibitors, it can cause problems with the fetus. So you don't want to use that. Generally, the things that are good in pregnancy that you want to use are like labetalol, hydralazine, methadone. You got to think about the placental barrier and what's going through the breast milk, obviously, later on. So a lot of these things you have to tell your doctor what you're taking. Some of my young females, I won't even use these medications because they may just fall off the chart. I may not see them again. Next thing I know, they're pregnant and they've been on these medications with poor follow-up, and so I won't use them at all. And then congestive heart failure, the ACEs and the beta blockers. So resistant hypertension, cautious with your blood pressure monitor. If there's a lot of issue at home versus what we're checking in the office, bring your monitor to the office. Let us check it. Monitor sodium, can't say that enough. The medications, other things that can interact with medications. Oral contraceptive pills are a big one. Another big one in the elderly patient population, people who are taking a lot of non-steroidals for chronic pain. I'll take them off that, put them on something that doesn't affect blood pressure. Usually those things work through the kidneys. Kidneys, blood pressure, heart, they just all work together. So if you take them off, those non-steroidals, a lot of them coming in taking massive doses of ibuprofen, other things like colchicine, things that you really want to avoid. Obviously, you don't want to be taking goodies. But there are a lot of good pain medications that do not affect blood pressure. And if I have to, I'll ultimately send patients to chronic pain clinic to get control of that so we can get better control of their blood pressure. Alcohol's there again. So the take-home message, and I think this probably is the last one, it is. So obviously it's a major cause of morbidity and mortality. Like I said, kidney disease, heart disease, strokes, extremely common. But, a lot of times people don't have symptoms, so we have to be cognizant of it. We always check this when people come in. Another important thing is checking both arms. Because sometimes there may be a vascular situation. Subclavian stenosis is the most common, but there may be a blocked artery somewhere where, if someone's having difficulty with their blood pressure, ultimately they may think about, well, let's check both arms. So they've been treating a blood pressure that's very high in one arm, but if you check it in the other arm, there's a 30-point difference. And then you got to look at the arteries. It may be something simple as subclavian stenosis. Put a stent in it, open it up, no more blood pressure problem. So we just need to keep an eye on things. And obviously, with you guys and doing what you're doing, I'm very impressed with everything that y'all have going on with your lifestyle modifications, your exercise and everything. We always have to get back to that because, we don't want to treat with drugs any more than we have to. You have to check labs, you got frequent patient follow-up appointments, you got, side effects, obviously. So if we can avoid it, and really try to eliminate it as much as possible, with just diet and exercise, lifestyle modifications, that's ultimately the way to go. So that's all I have here on my slides. What do you guys have for me? Yeah. Well, some of that could be, what's more common is people are not as in shape as they should be, maybe. So we see it all the time on the treadmill. when we bring people in for stress tests, their heart rate shoots up, their blood pressure shoots up. The most common cause of that is deconditioning. It's just, you got to start low, go slow, kind of let your symptoms be your guide. And it's just a training. You got to condition your body, right? So that should improve over time. Try not to overdo it at once. I don't limit people. I just say, keep an eye on things, your symptoms. Obviously, if you've got problems with your breathing, getting chest pain, obviously anything like that, you got to come back and tell me right away. But just try to start off, with just simple exercises. But try to do it on a more consistent basis, because you'll see as people begin to get more and more active and more of this good cardio that I talked about, 30 minutes a day of continuous exercise. And I don't care if that's running, walking, swimming, bicycling, whatever. Just get your heart rate up. And as far as what we calculate, usually when people come in, we calculate a certain percentage. So if your heart rate's at rest is about 80, what we'll do is we'll double it and use a percentage of it. So 160, and then we'll do it like an 85%. So you're talking about 130, 140. Should be your target. Should be where you are aiming to get, because that's where we're going to put you when you come in and do a stress test in our office. We're going to make your heart rate go up. And people are different. Sometimes people who are avid runners, people who exercise, it may take them 10 to 15 minutes to get there. Some people, they're off the treadmill in less than 2 minutes because their heart rate just shoots up. And usually that's a sign of deconditioning. So that should get better over time, as far as maintaining good exercise, cardio every day. Yeah, so people's bodies are different as far as how they respond. Anybody else?
So is coffee bad for people who have high blood pressure?
It's like alcohol. I always say it's like alcohol. You want to do it in moderation. You don't want to drink a lot of that. And I'm a coffee drinker myself, but it can really affect your blood pressure. I mean, it really can. Some people, they take their blood pressure before they even drink coffee in the morning, because it can affect them that much. So people are different. Genetics are different. I never tell anybody to eliminate it completely, because usually it's not a blood pressure issue. Usually it's the stimulant, the palpitation people get, and they feel their heart flutter, which is usually 9 times out of 10 benign. We'll put a monitor on somebody and check for that. Usually it's just these little extra benign beats we call PACs or PVCs. Most of us have them, but some people are more symptomatic than others. So that's usually where I start to eliminate. So some people, if they drink 1 cup of coffee, they feel like their heart's just racing. And then that can make them stressed, obviously. And that usually drives their blood pressure up, the stress of, how they're feeling from what their body's telling them. But yeah, I mean, moderation, a cup a day, I'd say, it's fine. It's okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Stimulants. A lot of those things you buy at the gas station, they're selling those little bottles like that. Last person I had to shock was because of that, because they were, burning both ends of the candle, working all day, or in school and working at night, studying, doing all this, drinking all these things they buy at the gas station, and their heart rate was 170, and they were in SVT. So I had to shock them right there in the emergency room. So yeah, try to avoid those, if at all possible.
20 milligrams of caffeine, or what's the goal per day?
Yeah, of the caffeine.
Caffeine.
Yeah, just 1 cup. I mean, generally, if you get, you look at the back of it, which is really important, because you want to see what kind of ingredients you're getting. Some of these coffees you don't know. There's so many different kinds of coffees now, so many different kinds of teas, and all kinds of things out there right now. But yeah, just be cautious. And it's good that the places are starting to tell you what they put in their foods and everything else. I mean, they even do that when you go, get a smoothie now. So it's nice that you know exactly what you're getting. Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody else have a concern there? Yeah.
How common is workplace stress related to some of your?
It's very common. It's very common. I mean, stress is just one of those things, whether it's at work or at home. I mean, and that's where, we start seeing its effect on blood pressure, and ultimately down the road effect on heart disease, and people, having, serious, stress at home that eventually can lead, to serious coronary event. But yeah, I mean, basically what it does is it increases the adrenaline. Your body produces its own adrenaline. The catecholamines is what we call it. And it really drives up the heart rate, drives up the blood pressure. Not only that, it can affect other things like glucose metabolism, a lot of things that ultimately, it doesn't just take one thing to cause a heart attack. There's several things going on. blood pressure, glucose, metabolism, cholesterol. Stress and catecholamines can affect all that. So, lifestyle techniques, modifications also. I always talk to them about stress modification, if you can do it and afford it, go get a massage once a month or whatever your escape is, Some people's escape is going for a walk, okay? Just make sure you do 30 minutes of it so you hit that guideline. So, people have different outs. I think it's important that all of us have one. Just make sure it's a healthy one, not a bad one, not binge eating or anything like that. Not chocolate, a little bit of chocolate, particularly dark chocolate, just like red wine. It's good for you. But anything else? Yeah. I hope you guys learn something today. Yeah. You want to take? I don't want to extract it before. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Man, thanks.
Yeah.